Hello, everybody. So I want to talk to you today about a question that I get a lot, a whole lot. I get it in satsang, I get it when I'm in meetings, and I get it when I'm like answering YouTube comments, and I get it sometimes in email. I just get it and get it and get it. And I understand it. I understand why. Nobody needs to be embarrassed for asking this question. Or if they do need to be embarrassed, then I need to be embarrassed right with them because I asked it many a time back in the day. I can remember it so well. And the question is simply this: how do I stay awake? Fred, how do I get to where I can stay awake permanently? That's the way it usually comes out. How do I stay awake permanently? And the first thing that comes to mind is, well, who's asking? So the way you can check on this is just to see if you've had a glimpse or more, who had it? Who had the glimpse? And if your name is Steve and you tell me that Steve had the glimpse, I got to bring to your attention that you are mistaken. And when I bring it to people's attention that they are mistaken and hit them with, is that really true? I've never had anybody stick to their guns. I don't believe. I mean, there could have been somebody after all these times, but as a not only a general rule, but as an almost non-accepted rule, that there is, or without exception, is what I mean. So almost without exception, people will bow to the truth. And what they will say is, they'll say, not Fred. And so when you hear the question, how do I stay awake? You need to hear it as awakeness. Don't hear it as the character, because there ain't one. So get it in your mind that there is no character. Don't blame shit on the character, because the character can't do anything, because the character doesn't exist. And the next time you're going to blame something, do me a favor, blame something that has a height, a weight, a duration, the volume, whatever. Give me something to point to. Because when you tell me the character, I just know you're insane. I mean, you're temporarily insane, and you may be charmingly insane. A lot of people are charmingly insane. But if you don't know who you are right now, you're insane. Just that simple. I was insane for years and years and years. So I'm just telling you that you are the same way that I used to be. And that should make you feel good, not bad, because if this old fool can get it, anybody can get it. It's not really that hard. You just have to be willing to tell yourself the truth. And what is the truth? Is that there's no character. I can't say this too many times. There is no character. So the one that you think you are, the one that's thinking, I'm a Fred or I'm a Bob, that's God. Yeah, that's right. That's awakeness itself. Awakeness is thinking I'm just this little man, right? And exclusive to everything else. I am this little man and only this little man. And I have consciousness. I am conscious. And no, you're not conscious, you're consciousness. World of difference between those two. Because I am conscious refers to a character that thinks it is conscious versus being unconscious. But a character thinking that way, I can guarantee you, is unconscious. So if that's your inquiry, you can stop right there. So what we want to do is we just want to recognize the truth that there is no character. And then what's the next thing? See, we don't want to just keep on saying, well, I feel like I'm the character. We can be seen that you are not. And then you say, well, I just don't know about that. Well, really? I mean, who is it that doesn't know about that? Well, I don't. Yes, and who are you? Well, I'm Bob, I think. And no, you're not Bob. We've just seen that you're not Bob. You've just confessed to me, usually, that you're not a Bob. Yet here you are telling me that Bob doesn't understand. And what I'm telling you is Bob doesn't want to understand. And this is the hard truth, is that we don't wake up until we want to wake up more than we want to stay asleep. And everybody wants their cake and eat it too. Everybody wants to stay asleep and enjoy the benefits of being enlightened, right? But we want, and I can tell you it was I was exactly the same way. I couldn't wait till Fred woke up. And then when Fred did wake up, in my mind, then I gloried in that, and until I recognized that that it was just not true. That whatever had happened had passed. That's what it feels like. Well, I had it, but I don't now. So if we can understand there is no character, then we got to look at the other thing, which is, so if I'm not the character, then what am I? See, it's very vital that I understand what I am if I'm going to try to figure out who it is that wants to stay awake. This is the real question. It's not how do I stay awake? It's who in the hell wants to know. But where is this I? You can't present one. In very short order, I can ask you a few questions and you'll come to see that there's no I. I mean, it just happened hundreds and hundreds of times here. Happened, I think, this past Sunday, and it said this past Sunday in satsang. I mean, somebody hit the lottery in satsang as far as they were concerned, I'm sure, because they got it at last. But that's not really hitting the lottery. It's not a lottery. It's your birthright. It really is your birthright. And it's in my eyes, it's just sort of a sad thing when you don't accept your birthright. And that's what happens when you come to see that there is no Bob. The one who comes to see that there is no Bob is awakeness. And what happens is right after awakeness sees the truth, Bob comes back. In other words, the character lifts up his head and goes, I ain't dead just yet. And so the character steps in. What do I mean by that? It means I just rebelieved in misidentification. If I am thinking I need to stay awake permanently, then that is a Fred talking. That is a Fred thinking. Then there's really no Fred, but those are the patterns here. So that's Fredness. You see the difference? Fred is an imaginary character. Fredness is an imaginary character also, but at least there are patterns here. There's a body here, and that body is Fredness, and these words are the pattern of a Fredness talking, and this is the way that Fredness looks. But there's no Fred here. There never has been, and there's no Bob, Susan, whatever your name is, whatever you think your name is, because your real name is awakeness. That's all there is. It's just awakeness. So how does awakeness plan on staying awake? Well, it just wants to remain in the truth. How does it remain in the truth? It doesn't believe the lies that the mind is going to feed you. That's it. See, when the mind gives us an idea, we somehow reach the conclusion that we must believe it. That if our mind tells us that, and by God, that's the truth. But, look at it. Has your mind ever lied to you? I mean, wow, my mind has lied to me so much that I can't really remember it doing much of anything else. What skillfulness has been had here has been had only through the lack of a Fred, not because of a Fred. This teaching, it was not founded by a Fred. It was founded by awakeness in the absence of a Fred. And awakeness came to recognize itself consciously. And when awakeness recognizes itself consciously, it's a little bit of a shock, and sometimes a great big shock. And right behind that shock comes oh, I'm not sure I really understand this. And do you want to understand awakening, or do you want to wake up? Because if you want to understand it, there's no point in your staying here, because you're never going to understand it if you stay here, because I don't understand it. And that's very disappointing to people who paid a lot of money to come and talk to Fred, to find out Fred doesn't know what he's talking about. And I can tell you that that's absolutely true, but I can also tell you that's not a big deal, because there's no Fred. There's no Fred who gets this. There's no Fred who doesn't get this. There's no awakened Fred. There's no unawakened Fred. There never was an unawakened Fred. This unit exists only on the level of relativity, but if we just take the level of relativity, how do I keep this unit awake? Well, I can't actually, there's nothing I do to keep something awake. I just prevent it from sleeping. Isn't that how we really stay awake? We prevent the body from sleeping. We will drink coffee to prevent the body from sleeping. We can't do anything directly. I mean, I know, because I wake up with the phone in my hand, because I've been looking at something right before I went to bed, or right before I went to sleep, or I wake up and there's a drink in the bed with me. I swear to God, because I'm a very active beaver until I'm absolutely out of it. And I have difficulty sleeping because there's so much to do. And Fred is such a doer. I wonder if you have that problem. Now, there's no Fred, but the Fred that there is, in the sense of the patterns that believe that they have a center. They're just loose patterns here. They're just, consider them to be in the same corridor, the same hallway, or whatever. And when they get it within a certain distance of each other, these patterns begin to operate cooperatively. And the first thing these patterns think is, I'm afraid. By God, there's something out there. I'm in the middle. There's a me here. I didn't know there was a me here, but I see now there's a me here. Wonderful. So, and now that there's a me here, the first thing I notice is that I'm just not enough. It's the ever deficient me. Isn't that right? The ever deficient imaginary me. Because not only do I imagine that there's a Fred here, but I immediately think that I am him, and I imagine that he is deficient. Why? Because you think this is something. If you do, this doesn't, right? I mean, I'm not sold on this character. If you are, good, it's pulling it off, but don't let it pull it off. Just come to see that what's over here really is awakeness in a suit that we have named Fred. And really the suit is Fredness. How do we know? It's coming and going. I mean, this thing has been alive for 71 years, and it's on its way out of here. I don't know how long it's got. I hope it's, a good long while, as long as Betsy and the boys are happy, because I get great joy out of that, and it's relative joy. And is that important? Only to imaginary Fred, but even awakeness loves loving. That's what awakeness loves to do. It loves to love. It's much more concerned about loving than it is being loved. So in order to stay awake permanently, you've got to stop preventing sleep or confusion or clouds from pouring in. And how are you going to do that? Well, just don't believe the mind. You don't need to believe the mind. It's never told you the truth, and it's not going to tell you the truth now. Two things we know about thoughts. One is they arise. And number two, none of them are true. That's all we need to know about thought. So just get the fact that what's asking you, or what ends up asking me really, is how do I stay awake permanently, is a pattern that is impermanent. Everything's impermanent here. Everything comes and goes. You can see it coming and going. This thing's going. It's still getting along, but it's on its way out of here. I can tell you that. And it's let me know by degree, right, as my body begins to fail me in different areas. But that's okay, because it's not my body. I don't have a body. I'm not on this planet. I do not have a body. The old headless way, I couldn't get that when you heard of the headless way, the non-dual path of the headless way, and it, it's a fine path. I mean, I've talked to them and everything, and I'm not in argument with them. It's a fine path. It didn't work for me, but it kind of did. I mean, in the sense that there was some response to it. So that was, which was more than I could say for just about everything else up to it. So hats off to the headless way. But when the way they start out is they let you know that you don't have a head, and it feels like, whoa, wait a minute, what are you talking about? What's this thing? And well, I don't know what it is. It doesn't feel like particularly like a potato, but it doesn't necessarily feel like my head either. It's not my head because I don't have one. I couldn't understand it in the day, but I do get it now. You know why? Because I'm not a Fred. There is no Fred anywhere of any type. And I am, and there is Fredness here, but I am not it. It doesn't mean that Fredness and everything else doesn't rise from me. I rise from me. It does, but it does not equal me, right? Nothing equals me because there's nothing other than me. So they can't be a me plus something that's greater or worse, or bigger or smaller, or anything like that. See where I live, there are no comparisons. There's just this. See? And where you live, I'll bet you anything, there are comparisons. There's the alertness that you have now, the sense of awakeness that you have now, and there's a sense of awakeness you think you should have. But see, if you should have it, you would have it. But that's the complaint, is Fred, I know I should be clearer than this. Really? Says who? You didn't get that from me, I guarantee you that. So the accepting of this as it is, that's how to stay awake. Don't get in arguments with God. And we do constantly. These units are like a running argument with God. You know why? Because it's not warm enough in here, or it's too warm in here. And the fan doesn't blow hard enough. And then 30 minutes, but God almighty, the fan's killing me. So all of these things are built on fantasies like comparisons, fantasies like alternatives, and they're just neither one. And I don't experience either one. I experience this, but my experience of this is that it's actually fine. Rarely do I raise my eyes or my fist the other way. I don't stay confused. I really don't. I don't stay confused about this. I don't argue with this very often. Does it happen? Absolutely. You know why? Because I'm a human being and I am the vast awakeness itself. I'm not a human being instead of being the vast awakeness, and I'm not the vast awakeness instead of being a human being. I am both. And therefore I've got to put up with the nonsense that goes with being a human. And it's kind of charming nonsense, but it's still nonsense. All the unskillfulness, all the selfishness and all of that stuff, it just comes with being a human being. So you can get tough on yourself if you want, but it won't do you any good. It really will not do you one bit of good. What it will do is it'll screw you up. You know why? Because you will constantly be finding fault with yourself. You'll find fault with the way that you look. You'll find fault with the way that you behave. You'll find fault with the way that you talk and walk and draw and write and sing and and run and do everything. It's always just not quite good enough. Not because after all, my standards are so high. I'm just putting this thing up in, just at this really advanced point where I just know it is or should be, but it's not there. But I'm hoping you'll think it's there, because God Almighty, you should find out what a fraud I really am, right? That instead of being a spiritual master, I'm a spiritual midget, right? And it's, this is what we tell ourselves. We're just not enough. And when we're doing that, we can bet your bottom dollar that you are asleep when you're doing it. And who it is that asleep can't be Fredness. There isn't a Fred. So it means there's awakeness. So awakeness, if you want to stay awake, that's what it boils down to. And when I say awake, you can't go to sleep. So what I mean, awakeness, if you want to be consciously alert to this here now, the way to do that is to accept this here now. And you think, well, I just can't accept this. Who is it that? Who accepts it, for that matter? That sounds like a character talking, but it's not. It's just that everything already is. So it's already been accepted. So you don't really need to accept this. You can't stop it. You just need to accept that this is the inevitable in action. This moment is the inevitable. This thing is really, really easy and really, really simple. No, I said, oh, that's really, really easy. No, excuse me. Let me back up and retract that lie. It's really, really simple. But it's not easy until it is. Now it's easy over here now. You know why? I don't do anything to stay awake. And so if I were to tell you what to do about how this one stays awake, so to speak, it's not really this one because there's no this one here. It's awakeness stays awake over here simply by questioning thought as it arises, which means this isn't right. Is that true? What's your evidence that this shouldn't be right, that this isn't right? Well, you don't have any. This is right. You know why? Because there are no comparisons. This is right because there are no alternatives. There's just this here now as it is, Just boom, work those, just carve those words into your skull there, as it is, because this is the life as it is. When I'm accepting life as it is, which includes the behavior and and all of that this thing gets way. I mean, it doesn't give this thing license to go out and behave any way that the unit thinks it could and should, because now it's unfettered. There's no Fred, so therefore I'm going to go out and rob people or do wrong to people or whatever. God Almighty, hurt people. Well, that was my mouse, so I'll be going down and getting my mouse before this video can complete. And since I cannot bend down, I'm going to go over here, get my grabber, and grab my mouse with this. And now you have just recognized the relative frustration of believing that you are a unit, because the unit is terribly restricted. I'm not restricted at all, but I can recognize that within relativity that this unit's very, very restricted because it can't walk. Well, it has to usually it uses a walker. Sometimes when it's not a walker, almost certainly it's got a cane. And if not, then it's plodding along very, very slowly and, very cautiously, because it just knows it's going to fall down and break its neck without it. So these restrictions, you give yourself these restrictions. You think mine are bad, you should try yours. My God, you think you're not good enough. You think you're not smart enough. You're not fast enough. You're not rich enough. You're not cool enough. You're not sexy enough. You're just not enough, are you? See, that's what you think. Or you can think that you're too much, but that's really somebody who thinks they're not enough, and they're just trying to trick us. And they may not even be aware of it, but they're really just full of themselves. And that's the truth. And this one's been full of itself, so it can certainly recognize it. And but it's not full of itself right at the moment. What I'm trying to do is to give away something very, very precious. Will you take it? Will you take it? I hope you will take this. Please. Awakeness. Give yourself a break. Stop thinking that you're a relative being. Stop thinking that you have a body. You know, I mean, it's fine to take care of this body, but don't think it's yours. Just think of it's like a pet, okay? Like I take better care of the dogs than I do of me. I mean, if one of us is going to eat, it's going to be them. I guarantee it. I'm going to go hungry, and I'm never going to look at those dogs as being anything other than my dear and glorious and divine friends. Never going to look at them and say, oh, that might make a burger. I couldn't. I just couldn't. So I understand my priorities as awakeness. You need to understand yours as awakeness and stop dealing with the priorities of the body. They don't amount to nothing. Well, I think that's enough. That's probably way too much, but that's what you got. You get what you get, and because you get what you get after I get what I get, and I get what I get when I get it, not before and not after. Never too soon, never too late, just right on time. And this video is right on time for you. How do I know? It can't not be. So you can listen to this. You can believe what I say. You don't have to believe what I say. You can go on and suffer as long as you want. But I don't want you to have to suffer. And when I say I'm speaking of awakeness. I don't want myself to suffer over there because I'm believing that I'm a human being. I mean, it's fun for a few millennia. Then it gets boring. It just gets tiresome for many of us. And some of us turn into seeking units. It happened to me, and apparently it's happened to you because you're watching this. Don't try to wake up that unit. Don't try to wake up the human being over there. The human being is not, and it cannot wake up. Understand that you are awakeness. Stand as awakeness right now. How do you do that? You just don't act as Fred. You don't believe for one moment. Can you just one moment? Will you recognize that the awakeness here, that the brightness here is the brightness we're talking about? That the awakeness here is this awakeness. It's your awakeness. Really, you are awakeness. It's not your awakeness, but it's I can screw up language as well as the next guy. I love you to death. I'm so glad you showed up here today. I hope you get a lot out of this, in spite of me. Be well. I'll see you soon.